Good evening, everybody. Before I start, Gillian's just asked me to read the all-important fire safety announcement. So we're not expecting any fire drill or alarms today, but in the likely event of an alarm being activated, make your way to an assembly point. Please don't re-enter the building until instructed to do so. And please check that all mobile phones are on silent now, please. Thank you. So it's my great pleasure. I should say I'm David Grieve. For those who don't know me, and on behalf of the Faculty of Medicine, Health and Life Sciences, it's my absolute pleasure to welcome you all to the inaugural lecture of Professor Kenda Crozier. So I always enjoy inaugural lectures. I think they're a fantastic opportunity, to celebrate your achievements, to celebrate career with family, friends and colleagues, and I've particularly enjoyed coming to the inaugural lectures from the School of Nursing and Midwifery because I think you do a fantastic job here in the lovely Lanyon building. So Kenda joined Queen's in August 2024 from the University of East Anglia, where she was Dean of the School of Health Sciences, and also having served a number of other important leadership roles there. So she joined as the head of school, obviously succeeding Professor Fitzsimons, who was obviously a tough act to follow. So over the last 9 months, I mean, it seems longer, Kenda. I'm not sure if that's a good thing or a bad thing. She's done a fantastic job in sort of establishing herself as the new head of school, and it's been really important, in sort of driving strategic development at both the school and a faculty level. I'm sure you can agree, Kenda, it's not been the easiest of times. So she's also, over this period, she's been integral into the continuous success of the school. So as you know, the school is really one of our flagships in terms of professional education in the faculty. In my role as Dean of Internationalisation of the faculty, I've particularly enjoyed working with Kenda. I've really appreciated her sort of insights, her support and really enthusiasm, I think, towards internationalisation, developing research and education partnerships, and also exploring some exciting new opportunities. This is really important as we continue to strive to keep and hopefully enhance the place of the school, within the top 100 in the world. So Kenda is a registered nurse and midwife with over 20 years of experience in higher education and health service across hospital, community and primary care settings. She's internationally renowned leader across both education and research, with a particular focus on student wellbeing, curriculum development, maternal mental health, midwifery ways of working and leadership. And in 2021, she was commissioned by the Health Education England to develop a capabilities framework for advanced practice in midwifery and associated education and career pathways to guide NHS England. I think this really evidences Kenda's standing and recognition within her field. So I'd just like to end my introduction really by congratulating Kenda again on her appointment as head of school and her appointment as a professor at Queen's University Belfast, and invite her to deliver her inaugural lecture entitled Expecting the Unexpected, Advancing Practice in Midwifery and Nursing. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I also enjoy these occasions, or have done up until this evening. These lectures are really quite unique. They're very different. As academics, we're used to presenting to conferences of our peers. We're very used to teaching our subject areas. But these lectures, which are a little bit personal and a little bit professional, are a little bit daunting. But thank you all very much for coming and supporting me. And I hope there's something here for all of you this evening. So we'll just see if I can work the technology. Great. So the focus this evening then is going to be, first of all, a little bit about me and my journey into nursing and midwifery. And then I'm going to talk about two big projects that I've been involved in across the years. One in advancing nursing practice through developing research capacity, particularly within one trust, but with ripples that have rippled out across the profession. And the second one then on advancing midwifery practice, which was which David referred to. And so this rather austere looking building was the hospital that I was born in Germany, in a snowstorm. And my mother's recollection of the birth was not of the fear of giving birth on her own because my father was at work, but that the ambulance got stuck on the hill on the way up to the hospital, and the crew got out to look for assistance to push the ambulance out of the snow. And that's all she can remember about it. The birth was pretty smooth. She got into the hospital. I was born. Simple. So, and this is my mother and father, me and my sister. I'm the oldest of three, and my sister was born in London. My brother was born in Guildford in Surrey, and that was obviously my brother's baptism. And after that, we moved back to Northern Ireland. Now, my journey into nursing, reflecting on this really for tonight, and thinking about what brought me to nursing, what drew me to nursing. Really, this was the key thing that I remember about engagement with nurses and hospitals was the visit to an intensive care unit when my father was shot and was in hospital and very seriously ill. And the children were brought to see him. And outside the intensive care unit, the nurse came out and spoke to us. She got down to our level. She said, "Now, this is what you have to expect going in here. Your father is in there. There are other people in there. They've got nothing to do with you. You don't have to worry about them. Machines, tubes, beepy things. You just go straight to his bed and know that we're looking after him." And that kind of stuck with me as a great kindness. And my father was in hospital for many, many, many weeks, a long, long time. He had a lower limb amputation. And he has a recollection that he used to tell us about the nurses' kindness in the nighttime when he couldn't sleep. They would come and they would sit with him, they would make him a cup of tea. And when he began to mobilize, got up on his crutches or his temporary prosthesis, he made them cups of tea. He got up in the night and he went to the kitchen and he made them cups of tea. And he would meet these nurses in the street years later and they would remember him and he would remember them. And he would say, "I remember her. She looked after me. She was in this ward in Altnagelvin." And that really is having an impact on somebody's life in that way as a nurse, I thought was something really to strive for and a really wonderful goal. So this is the poor innocent little me who started nursing in the Royal Victoria Hospital. That uniform was a complete nightmare. I had to get up, I don't know how many hours early. There's a couple of friends in the room who started with me. We had a whole lesson on how to build that hat. It's not in the picture because it was just too tricky. And I used to have to get up super, super early to try and put all these regalia on. I mean, this was the 1980s. This was not like 1945 or something. There was no need for all of this. But that's and being interviewed for the Royal and them asking me, "What do you think a nurse does all day?" And I said, "Well, she's kind to people and she supports people." It was always she. And I don't know what they saw in that, but they must have seen some potential and they let me in. But after a year, I got married and moved to England. They were very cross when I told them that I was planning to get married. And off I went and finished my training at Addenbrooke's Hospital in Cambridge. Much different uniform, much more relaxed atmosphere. Great training, great education. I really, really enjoyed it. And it's there that I was exposed to research actually in the clinical areas, patients being part of clinical trials and things like that. So that I really enjoyed. I'm on the 1, 2, 3, 4 in from the left-hand side, sitting, there's people piled on top of me. So And it was, I did a lot of jobs in nursing. I moved about, and my son was born about a year after I'd finished my nurse training. Maternity leave was very short in those days. I was back at work 3 months later. And so I worked as a practice nurse for quite a while and various different nursing roles, and then decided I would do midwifery. Midwifery training was in Salisbury District Hospital and Bournemouth University. So the placements were in Salisbury, and there was a lovely new general hospital there, District General Hospital. But the maternity wards were in the old Odstock Hospital, which was an American wartime relic. But it was lovely. It was a great atmosphere. Again, a fantastic education I had there with a very nice experience of collegial working with midwives and doctors, midwives and obstetricians. And from there, I moved to Fermanagh. That's not my boat, but it was, we moved to Omagh and I worked in Fermanagh in the Urn Hospital, slightly more hierarchical, as I recall, but I enjoyed it. And I worked at the Urn Hospital and in Dungannon as well, and later had a community midwifery post, first in Omagh and then Fermanagh. And my daughter was born at home in Omagh, which was another story that I could tell another night. But that was a lovely experience for me. But the GPs were not keen on the idea of me doing that. So yeah, that was a very interesting occasion. So I took opportunities to study when I was back in Omagh, and I did a degree and a master's here at Queen's, and my dissertation supervisor suggested that I might like to undertake a PhD, and I was successful in applying for funding, a joint National Board Award from the National Board for Nursing and Midwifery in Northern Ireland and Bord Ultranis. So that was great to have that funding. And I realized when I was putting this into the slide that this was 20 years ago. And Marlene Sinclair, who's here tonight, I just want to say thank you for the mentorship over the years. But there we were, fresh-faced and ready for everything. So we'll move on from this to the projects. By the time I graduated with the PhD, I was working at the University of East Anglia as a lecturer. And trying to find my way into research, doing different projects. And one of the local trusts, partner trusts, had a consultant nurse there called Kath Kite, who was very interested in developing research in her trust. She came to the university and she met with me and a nursing colleague called Jenny Moore. And together we created a plan to do some capacity building work. And at that time, there was a call for research in staff development by one of the regional health authorities in the east of England. And we put together the proposal, and we were awarded a grant of £300,000, which was a lot at that time to conduct this study. And it was called Innovations in Nursing and Midwifery Practice, IMP. And we carried on for about 4.5 years, 5 years on this project. Action research study aimed at developing research skills in nurses and midwives. And the study scoped the existing organisation structure to establish how research was viewed and used by nurses and midwives in the trust. And then we developed an infrastructure to support nursing and midwifery projects. And the nurses and midwives used the skills that we facilitated them to develop to plan and deliver innovative projects in their practice areas to benefit patient care and lay foundations for future research. Now, participatory action research is a particular methodology, which in most research, there are people who decide how you do the research and people who do the research collect the data. In action research, the plan is to involve the people in deciding what needs to be done and in doing it. So it's really about co-production. And if possible, then we involve those people in who've done the action in reflecting and on the outcomes and analysis of that and planning for the next stage. So as I said, the aim of the study was to develop an infrastructure for nurses and nurse and midwife research capacity building in that trust, which was the James Paget University NHS Foundation Trust, which was a coastal and rural area with quite high deprivation index. Funding initially, we asked for some pump prime funding while we had the application in process from the trust board. And that was my first experience of standing in front of a trust board and trying to sell an idea. It was pretty Dragon's Den with more than 3 dragons, and it was quite nerve-wracking, but they were supportive of the idea. Obviously, money was tight. Money is always tight in these organizations, but they did give us a small pot to start the kind of first step scoping exercise. And then the competitive funding came through from East of England, which enabled the project really to develop to its full potential. So, as I say, this is action. First of all, then a critical review of that action, and then planning for a further cycle. So it's cycles, not bicycles, but cycles. And the results of the first step then, where we interviewed midwives and nurses in the trust to ask them about what they understood about research and development and innovation in the trust. Unsurprisingly, really, research activity wasn't really embedded in the organisation. This was probably 2008, 2009. No, yes, 2008, 2009. And then we asked them about initiating change. If they wanted to make a change, if they saw a change that needed to be made to benefit patient care, would they know how to go about that? And they told us that initiating and undertaking change was a resource-intensive process, and there was confusion about who you would go to or how you could make that change happen, and how you would get support in terms of financial resources or other resources to do that. So that gave us a kind of starting baseline where we knew where we were starting from, really, with that. So then we went into planning phase and we set up a steering committee. You can't do anything without a steering committee. So we had myself and Jenny and Kath, so the nurse consultant, the 2 academics, and we invited a couple of the senior leadership team from nursing onto that steering committee to help us start really planning and getting moving with the project. We had the finances, so we made a financial commitment to invest in capability, which was training of all of the staff who wanted to be involved, and capacity by funding individual research projects. And we started with internal funding of small-scale research activity, really aiming to encourage a kind of bottom-up approach in order to increase research capacity, despite the fact that that might be slower at producing results. So the plan was to identify the talent, identify where the ideas were coming from, bring in those ideas, then do some sifting and sorting to get the right projects to put the support behind, award support and time for people to do the project and financial support, enable them to implement and evaluate what they were doing, and to disseminate, most importantly, what they were doing. And this banner in the middle was the was the thing that we thought would attract people. So we put this up on posters and all over the trust, really. So the capability building workshops then. We were helping people to write their purpose statements and develop a research question. We roped in the hospital librarian to help them develop their evidence to support their project ideas. Then we worked with them on proposal writing, including the work plans and focus on outcome measures, and also helping them to think about how they costed their projects. Now, this is a complicated slide, and I'm sorry it's very small writing in it, but each row represents a cycle of the project. So in the first year, in the first iteration, we had 3 project proposals that we supported, and they all came from matrons, so divisional leads in the hospital. And that was okay, actually. That worked really well. And this key worker role, the first one on the right here, on my right, was a key worker role to support in the orthopedic department to ensure the smooth flow of information and planning to enable patients to work their way through the system and go home in a timely fashion, because they had identified there was an issue with results piling up, decisions not being made, nobody having a conversation with the families around planning for discharge, and therefore patients were staying in really longer than they should have. And it worked really well, and the results were very positive. And as a result, the matron in charge of that project was able to go with a business case to the trust board and say, we would now like to have this as a permanent feature. And that really, it improved patient flow, but it also reduced the number of complaints that they received in that department. So it was, for the trust board, it was a really great result for them. In the second year, we had a great project come through midwifery, which was aimed at supporting young pregnant women. This was called Teenage Kicks. And it was a nurse who worked, these were all specialist nurses in that second iteration. There's a specialist midwife, actually, who worked with young women. And they identified that the material that they had around antenatal care and pregnancy just wasn't suitable for them. It didn't talk to them in their language, and they felt excluded by it. So she worked with a graphic designer and the young people to co-create information that was of use and value to them. It resulted in better engagement in the service and actually in increased breastfeeding rates. And that won a national award in the RCM and was published. And so on with the other projects. Down at the bottom here, we have the Promoting Family-Centred Care, that there was a publication that came around that, and also recognition as well from that study. Some of these studies, the breast care one after treatment for breast cancer, exercise intervention, was something that was developed by a specialist team of nurses that they wanted to move forward to apply for competitive funding. But life got in the way for one of the nurses involved, and that didn't happen. But that was an excellent project as well. So in between the cycles, the steering group met and decided on the next cycle. We looked at what had worked well and what needed to improve. And changes were made to improve the process, increase the involvement of junior staff after cycle 1. In cycle 2, the project leads from cycle 1 joined the steering group and helped us make the decisions and shape the next process. And we brought in finance officers in cycle 2 to help with the costing. And after cycle 2, we introduced a coaching approach. So all those who'd been involved in previous projects were able to coach the people coming up after them. And in cycle 3, we involved the R&D staff to help develop projects that would come out of that could go forward for national funding. Some of the projects became master's dissertations. There were a couple developed into PhDs. So it was slow incremental steps, but constantly moving forward. We did a final evaluation really before we had completed the project. We did another couple of cycles after our final evaluation, but we found that it provided development opportunities for nurses and midwives way beyond the research capability building. They really got leadership skills out of this, and it led on to future careers for some of those involved. One of the midwifery projects around domestic violence, the person who led that is now a director of midwifery in a London hospital. And one or two of the specialist nurses then went into leadership roles in the trust that they were working in, and others moved away and moved up. And there was an academic as well who came out of those projects. So, and a couple, as I say, of PhDs. So pretty successful project. And it did build research capacity in the staff, and it did build research capability. And the reasons for the success were really that strong internal support along with the external support from the university. And it became central to the mission of the hospital, which also was a reason for success. The fact that we had funding to fund the individual projects over a period of time was absolutely essential. Without that, it would not have survived. The workshops and the one-to-one support and the coaching were identified as really key to the success as well. And having the champion, first of all, in the form of Kath Kite, who retired round about cycle 3, just into cycle 3. And we had a new research lead nurse arrive in the trust called Claire Whitehouse, who is a dynamic individual. And she has really carried on the legacy of that project. She has embedded researchers now as part of the organizational culture. She carries on with a form of the training that we had provided with NIHR's support. And she's done a big project on the careers of clinical research nurses called the Whitehouse Report. And she's now the clinical research director in the trust, which is quite amazing because that's quite often a job held by a medic. And we got a couple of papers out of it as well. And we did a lot of dissemination of that project around the country. Very, very proud of that project. So moving forward then to advanced practice in midwifery. I've always been one of those midwives who's asked, why are we doing it this way? And that's not always made me popular in the ranks of midwives. But we keep pressing on. Just harking back, doing a little bit of history for myself. In 1993, the United Kingdom Central Council for Nursing and Midwifery consulted on having 3 levels of practice and dividing the register up into those 3 levels of practice. Primary practice, that initial, when you come out of training and you're consolidating your knowledge and your competencies. Specialist practice, which speaks for itself, and advanced practice. The Midwifery Committee at the UKCC argued strongly against the imposition of the higher levels of practice, claiming that midwifery was specialist practice at the point of registration. And they did some mapping to demonstrate that, and they demonstrated that nearly all of the competencies were specialist level. But over the next decade, hospitals began to change the way they were providing services. 1993, there was a great big report called Changing Childbirth, which aimed to change the way that service was delivered. And that report was led by Julia Cumberledge. Over that decade, hospitals started to decide that they needed specialist roles. They needed specialist midwives to provide care for women with certain conditions, diabetes being one. They needed midwives to support maternal medicine, fetal medicine. And there was also a drive within midwifery, aided and abetted by one of the regional health authorities, to develop a layer of midwifery called consultant midwives. And that really was born in Wessex in England. And those midwives were really aiming to try and move service forward and create service improvement through implementing evidence-based practice and leading and education. Now, the midwifery press in 1993 was very preoccupied with education for midwives, debating whether or not we should have a degree or not have a degree, and whether there should, still arguing about advanced levels of practice. This was in the British Journal of Midwifery. Nina Hopkinson wrote, "There is a need for all midwives to advance their practice. There's also a need for expert, innovative practitioners who can challenge practice on an equal academic level as those of their medical colleagues. The midwifery profession needs to urgently debate the education of such practitioner and the way in which that practitioner will need to practice." Well, moving forward a number of years, 2016, the Better Births report came out. And this was a large-scale report that looked at the experience of women in maternity care, led by Baroness Julia Cumberledge. She said that women have made it abundantly clear to us that they want to be in control of their care in partnership with their healthcare professionals. And with this control comes a responsibility which mothers must accept and professionals must support, that personal health and fitness are integral to safe and fulfilling childbirth. There was a lot of debate at this time around the safety of childbirth, and the NHS England, Health Education England, decided that perhaps it was time to look again at advanced practice in midwifery. By this time, there were advanced practice roles being advertised all over the country in maternity services. And we were commissioned to do a deep dive analysis of advanced clinical practice in midwifery, mapping the midwifery standards against the competencies. And in 2019, those proficiencies were changed by the NMC. So we set out to map against the previous standards as well as the new standards. So just so we're clear about what advanced practice is, NHS England had created a multi-professional framework for advanced practice in 2017. And the advanced clinical practice was designed to support health professionals who would be operating with a high degree of autonomy, using complex decision-making, with 4 pillars to that practice. The first being their clinical expertise in practice, leadership and management being part of that, and education pillar and a research pillar. And being able to demonstrate the core competencies of the core capabilities of the multi-professional framework alongside their own particular clinical competencies for their professional role. So the NMC have recently decided that they want to regulate this role, and they've produced their own definition specifically for nurses and midwives. And this was put to the NMC Council, the Nursing and Midwifery Council, in March this year. It doesn't look that much different. The only thing that's missing are the 4 pillars and the mention of research. Now, we did this as a multi-stage project. Again, starting off with looking at the evidence which NHS England had called for from trusts in the shape of job roles, any evaluation that they had done of advanced practice roles in midwifery. Now, bearing in mind that advanced practice existed in nursing all over the place, and there were lots of advanced practice nursing roles. We did the literature review to look at the international literature around nursing and around midwifery, and found most of it was in nursing with a very small mention. Ireland had by this stage regulated advanced practice. So there's a part of the register for advanced practice nurses and advanced practice midwives. And we did a huge amount of stakeholder engagement in this project, talking to heads of midwifery, directors of midwifery, specialist and advanced practice midwives and consultant midwives. And we did the mapping exercise. The directors of midwifery told us that, that advanced practice needed to be supported by master's level qualification, and that they had seen the neonatal nurse practitioner model, and they did not want that for midwifery because they saw that as medical substitution. But some of them did want to have advanced practice roles. I can see your face, Breach. That is their words, not mine. So and they gave us some examples of the type of roles that they knew of within their trust, or that they had developed in their trust. And there weren't many trusts that had developed these roles. So they were around complex care, high dependency care, and perinatal mental health. And they also added in that some of these midwives had skills in ultrasound scanning and prescribing, independent supplementary prescribing. And the key points really that come from that were that we were really at pains to say that advanced clinical practice is a level of practice, and trusts needed to understand that when they were designing job roles, they needed to decide whether they needed it at that advanced level of practice or not. There was a lack of information for midwifery leaders around that, so it was a potential barrier. But in the meantime, midwives were seeking out opportunities. They were going and doing masters in advanced practice. They were carving out roles to try and change the practice because they saw a need within the service. And we mapped the NMC proficiencies and found that really it would be inaccurate to describe newly qualified midwives as advanced clinical practitioners. And gaps were identified in all 4 pillars. So it wasn't that they were doing it in one area and not in others. And we produced this report, which is in the pack for any of you who are in. Oh, this one isn't in the pack. The capability framework is in the pack. This is available online. The national campaign, we decided it would be good to do a national campaign to really do some myth busting around advanced practice and work towards the development of an education and career pathway. Because what the midwives who were working in these roles told us was that they wanted to stay close to the women. They did not want a career in management. They did not want a career in education that potentially took them away from the women at the centre of care. And they wanted to be part of improving a service. And that there should be workshops regionally and nationally, really, for those midwifery leaders to try to who had introduced advanced practice, and for advanced practitioners to be able to share their experience. And also women came into those workshops and shared their experience of having complex medical needs in pregnancy, and how they valued the advanced practice midwife because they didn't have to keep telling their story to lots of different professionals over and over again. So we developed the capability framework. That was more stakeholder work. We had learned how to do this all online by then. thanks to COVID, and that gave us a great opportunity to gather a wide range of views. And we used interactive materials in workshops to really bottom out what those capabilities would look like. And that was really an exercise in semantics and very painstakingly done, but really, really interesting. And we involved all levels of practitioners and the Nursing and Midwifery Council and the Royal College of Midwives. And we had representation from Wales and Scotland. I'm not so sure that we had anybody from Northern Ireland on those stakeholder groups. And we did fall into discussion about the regulation, but that was out of our scope of practice. And this was the team who worked with me on this. And some of them were here yesterday doing a great workshop with the Chief Midwifery Officer and heads of midwifery over in Middle Hall, which was just a great thing. So this is what the capability framework looks like. And really, it is about describing the fact that you need to be a registered midwife and you need to meet the multi-professional capabilities. And on top of that, you also have to demonstrate the midwifery capabilities that we had identified in order to be an advanced practitioner. And that included a master's level training. So the career and education framework doesn't look exactly like this, but it's about identifying what these levels look like in the order that you might develop them, from being newly qualified through a kind of enhanced practice to an advanced clinical practice to a consultant level, and the kind of qualifications that you might do to get there. And this was a paper that we had published last year in the journal, the European Journal of Midwifery. And we've been out on the road trying to disseminate this as widely as possible. And so moving a little bit more locally to advanced practice in Northern Ireland. Really, we've got to get rid of this image, the Sunday night image of midwives on a bicycle. The service no longer requires that. The service has changed and the expectation of mothers and families has changed. And in light of the maternity reports across England, Wales, and more recently in Northern Ireland, it's clear that change is needed in the way that care is provided. And the introduction of advanced practice with a broader range of expertise and experience of multi-professional working across specialities can support those who have the most complex needs in pregnancy, birth, and early parenthood. It's not suggested by anyone that this needs to be all midwives. And Queen's, I'm very proud to say, is working on developing, and the midwifery team are at the back, and they are developing the masters in advanced practice for midwives. And the Nursing and Midwifery Council, meanwhile, are working on the regulation of advanced practice. And this, I think, on reflection, is something that I saw in a Buddhist temple while wandering around in Thailand, and I think it really speaks to me as a nurse and a midwife. The most valuable service is one rendered to our fellow humans. I want to say thanks to these people, some of whom are here in the front row. My lovely husband, Paolo, who's not here. And my note to myself says, "Don't cry, Kenda." So, and thank you all.
Kenda, that was marvellous. So, good evening. I'm Professor Judy Williams and I'm the Pro-Vice Chancellor for Education and Students. And it's a privilege to join you all for this exceptional professorial lecture by our esteemed colleague and head of the School of Nursing and Midwifery, Professor Kenda Crozier. Tonight, we've been treated not only to an insightful exploration of advanced practice in midwifery, but also a story, a remarkable journey. one that exemplifies leadership, innovation, and an enduring commitment to improving the lives of women, families, and communities through your research-informed practice. Kenda's taken us on a real tour, and I had the privilege of walking in today with her, and we were talking about shared experiences and shared colleagues that we know, and it's amazing how many lives she's touched. But she's taken us from the early days of her career through the corridors of the collegial corridors of Salisbury District Hospital to her pioneering work on action research and the development of innovations in nursing and midwifery practice project. Now, as a mum, I really bow down to the midwife colleagues who helped me through what was challenging childbirth. And I would imagine many of us in the room have had experiences where we've lent on the midwives who supported us, both in pre and post care, giving birth. And they are exceptional. And Kenda has been able to then take them to the next level, giving them the research skills to really then enhance and change their practice. So I'm going to open up for questions before I close us. Any questions for Kenda on her remarkable career and the inspirational talk that she's given us tonight?
Stunned them into silence.
It's okay, because I'll always have a question or two, so there's no getting out early. So with that in mind, Kenda, what one or two key things have been really, those pivotal points for you that you think, well, actually looking back, have really changed your career?
Oh my goodness, Judy, that is a very difficult question. I think meeting particular people, having conversations, sometimes those are just short snippets of conversation. Meeting Marlene Sinclair, who inspired and has mentored me through the years, having that very brief conversation initially with Cass Kite that sparked the IMP project, and just some of the colleagues that I have worked with who have just, we've been able to spark ideas of people. And I think those are precious, very, very pivotal moments for me. And of course, seeing that job role advertised for a head of school at Queen's University Belfast. And I was sitting having a cup of coffee with my daughter and saying, oh, have you seen this? And we both thought it might be quite a nice idea.
Glad you made a look at it. Any questions? Yeah. You're fine. Try forward. Just forward when the line goes to forward.
Thank you, Mary Frances. I appreciate that sentiment. It's great to be working with the department on these projects.
Well, there'll be plenty of opportunity when we go through and to ask questions if you're all a little bit shy. So what stands out is Kenda's ability to see beyond the horizon. I loved her quote there, why are we doing it this way? And I think that really sums up her tenacity here, and enabling people to question and then find that research and evidence base to transform practice is really, truly remarkable. And she's mentioned some of the connections and some of the people. And I'd also like to say her mentorship and strategic collaborations and deep respect for the voices of others, she's really modelled what it means to lead with integrity and generosity. Kenda's work on advanced midwifery practice has national and international significance, and I echo your comments here. We're delighted to have her back in Northern Ireland, really shaping and leading from the front here. Her leadership in shaping the education and career framework and her involvement in the deep dive analysis of advanced clinical practice in midwifery have provided clarity in a landscape once defined by ambiguity. Her dedication and co-production and her assistance on research and evidence base and her commitment to that inclusive dialogue with stakeholders all helped elevate the role of the midwife, not only in the health system, but actually across society. And tonight's lecture, the title, Expecting the Unexpected, really speaks volumes. It captures not only the unpredictability and complexity of childbirth in healthcare, but also the courage it takes to lead transformation. Kenda has not only embraced the unexpected, she's anticipated it. She's harnessed it and turned it into what can be, for so many, opportunity. Her generosity has led to many of us being in the room tonight, and her legacy will live on in the capabilities that she's building, the careers that she's inspired, and the systems that she's now helping shape. So Kenda, on behalf of us all here tonight, your family, your colleagues, your students, and your friends, we all thank you. Thank you for your wisdom, your kindness, your clarity of purpose, and your tireless advocacy for the profession of midwifery. You are quite simply an inspiration. So please join me in expressing congratulations, Kenda. You're an inspiration to us all. Thank you.